Welcome to my channel. If you have not been here before, my name is Carmelita. I am an industrial organizational psychology PhD student, and I am a clinical mental health counselor. I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and a master's in IO psychology. Finishing my PhD, like I said. But yeah, so welcome to my channel. Today I thought I would talk about kind of like my journey in social anxiety disorder or social phobia disorder. I don't really like the term social phobia because it implies that you're afraid of social situations, which really you're just anxious of social situations, not really afraid. At least that's my experience. Usually you want to be social, but you are anxious in social situations. So I like the term social anxiety disorder better, so that's what I go with. And when I have clients with social anxiety disorder, that is what I call it. I do tell them, social phobia is what it's called in DSM, but when I talk about it to them or talk to them, I talk about social anxiety. And I kind of use the two interchangeably because I don't like that negative connotation of social phobia. It implies that you are phobic, and I don't like that. Okay, so anyways, let's get into it. So I think that I have always been kind of an introvert, even from young childhood. My earliest memory of when social anxiety he's playing. Okay. My earliest memory of when social anxiety impacted me was when I was like probably about 3 or 4 in preschool. I remember really having to use the bathroom really, really badly. But I knew that there was like a bunch of kids in the bathroom. They were using it, and then there was kids lined up against the wall to use the bathroom, and I was like at the back of the line. And instead of telling the teacher, hey, I really have to go, I'm going to pee on myself, I just peed on myself. And I didn't say anything to anybody. Oh my gosh, I hope you can hear me. I didn't say anything to anybody, and I think my reasoning, I was 3 or 4, so my reasoning was probably, it's not going to change anything. If I say something to a teacher, they're probably still going to make me wait, so I may as well just pee. But after peeing, I didn't say, hey, I peed on myself, and that's when fear came in, like the fear of being in trouble for peeing on myself, because I was getting in trouble at home for having those accidents. I would get whoopings and stuff like that, so for peeing on myself. So yeah, I was just afraid of punishment, so I didn't say anything. And then of course you can't really hide that. The teacher finds out, they smell it, they can tell, and then sometimes they change. So then she told my parents, she had an accident today, but she didn't say anything to us. And then I got in trouble for not saying anything. So, which just makes you, as a kid with anxiety, especially social anxiety, getting in trouble for things like that just makes you even shut down even more and get even more quiet. Hello? Yeah. Okay, hopefully you can hear me. But that even makes you just get shut down even more and get even more quiet and things like that. So that didn't help. Honestly, I don't know. I guess we can get into parenting techniques in a different video. That's a completely different topic. But it did play a role in developing social anxiety and things like that. Okay, so moving forward. Elementary school happened. I think actually kindergarten happened, and I was nervous, to be around all these new kids and stuff like that, but I actually had an easy time. By the end of the day, my first day of kindergarten, I had so much fun, and I didn't mind it at all. But like 2nd grade, I started getting it. I was always like the good kid who would get the prizes and things like that, but when I got in trouble with the teacher, I would get so angry. But when I get angry, I don't say anything. And so but I would just like shut down, and just stop following directions. If I got really upset, I really wanted to physically hurt somebody, that's how bad my anger would get. But you couldn't tell because it was all bottled up inside me like this. So then I think when I moved out of Chicago into the suburbs, I was in 5th grade, And then it wasn't until 6th grade where the social anxiety thing started coming up again. Interestingly, 5th grade was easy for me. Like, I didn't have that many friends in Chicago anyway. I mean, I did have friends in Chicago, but like I got bullied in Chicago so much that I was kind of just like, okay, good, I'm leaving, on to something else. And like I did miss Chicago. There were things about Chicago that I missed a lot. But moving forward, like my social life was better in the suburbs. It just was. I was bullied a lot less, picked on a lot less, and things like that. There was just a lot more support as well. And so I went, 5th grade was easy. I made friends easily. 6th grade is when things started to get interesting. I think 6th grade is when my teacher told the social worker that she thought I would have a hard time adapting to middle school, so she recommended that I speak with the social worker regularly. And so the social worker had me in her office. She said, you know, you can bring friends if you want to. And so the next time I was in her office, I brought some friends with me. We filled up her entire room, and she was kind of just like, what? Like, she was like, I didn't know you had this many friends. And I was like, yeah, well, neither did I. And so I like invited a couple of friends who also invited friends, and then so the whole table was full of people. But the topic that day came up of like bullying and people at school and things like that. And we talking specifically about this girl who was really mean to most people, but she was very popular. And so the social worker asked, you think you have to be mean to be popular? And then one of the girls was like, no, Carmelita's popular and she's the nicest person I know. And I was like, what? I think me and the social worker were surprised by that statement. Like, what do you mean popular? Like, I'm in the social worker room because I'm not popular. At least that's what the teacher thought. And so it was just really interesting thinking back to it. It's like funny how an adult's perspective of a child's behavior is much different than a child's perspective of another child's behavior, right? So like the adult thought that I was, you know, a social pariah or something, and the kids thought that I was super popular because I had friends in every class, and I was a nice person. And so that was surprising to me. It made me feel good, obviously. And I think after that, I never had to go to a social worker again because she was kind of just like, she's got no problems. But middle school happened, and my teacher was right. It was hard for me to make new friends because all my friends that I had in elementary school went to different middle schools. Not all of them, but most of them. And so I had to make new friends and kind of figure out where I belonged in middle school, which was hard. But I still made friends in middle school. I had my little clique of friends, and they were all on different teams. We were divided by teams or whatever. And so that meant that they weren't in my classes, which also made it hard, but eventually it was whatever. So middle school is probably like the worst fragment of school childhood, I think, other than like being bullied in Chicago, just because it's like the awkward stage of like going through all these growth spurts, not fitting your clothes, trying to figure out where you stand. You're not a teenager, you're not a kid, it's just an awkward age. And then high school happened. High school was interesting because when I first started high school, I was of course very quiet, and did not like, I tried to get involved in stuff like after school so that I could make friends, and I don't think I really started making friends until winter because that's when basketball season started, and I started playing basketball, and that's how I made friends. And I started running track, and that's how I made more friends. And then it kind of just continued like that throughout the rest of the years. Like I had my friends from sports, then I also just made friends in class, and so I just had different friends from different groups that I knew in different ways, knew from different ways. So yeah, I mean, I still had some social anxiety in high school, definitely had a lot of social anxiety in high school. I mean, think of like this quiet person, and it's a big space with all these people from different middle schools that you just don't know, and you're trying to figure yourself out, and you're trying to figure them out too, and where you belong, and all this. So yeah, I mean, I remember freshman year of high school, my gosh, I remember this so clearly. For maybe the first semester of school, or at least the first quarter, I would sit in English class closest to the door so that I could make a quick escape when the bell rang, watching the clock for all 50 minutes, just waiting for that bell to ring. I would literally be shaking. I had tremors. I don't know if anybody noticed. I think people were too absorbed in whatever they were doing in class. But the reason I was so nervous in English class is because our teacher would have us like do random speeches. Like you pulled a topic out of a hat and you had to talk about it for 30 seconds type of thing. That was terrifying for me. And so I was in class every day, super anxious, super shaky, and watching the clock like, okay, we've gone a half an hour without her coming over here and asking me to do something. Okay, we 20 more minutes, I can do this. Like coaching myself in my brain to calm down. And eventually I started like just, what's going on? Eventually I started just doing deep breaths and just going, and like clenching my fists, which actually doesn't help, but I didn't know that I was only 14. I was just trying to calm my body down in any way that I could. And eventually the more I went to class, obviously I didn't ditch class, but the more I went, the less anxious I was. The more I got to know the people in my class, I made friends and stuff. Things just got a little bit easier. The anxiety went away, the tremors went away. I started to breathe easier in class and stuff like that. Oh, going back to middle school, I do remember a time where we had to share our creative stories, and I started crying while I was sharing mine because I thought people were talking about me because they were whispering during my thing. Realistically, looking back, they probably were just talking about something completely different, but because I had such a history of being bullied when I was a kid, whispers were usually always about me, so anytime people whispered in class, I automatically assumed it was about me, even if it wasn't. And so that made me cry because I was like, oh, sharing my story and people don't like it, I'm crying, and so now I'm crying and that's making me even more nervous. So that's like that. So it kind of like when high school started, it was kind of like, and my teacher started doing those things to us, like with the speeches or whatever. I was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be like middle school all over again. I'm gonna start crying, I'm gonna start crying. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Kind of like that type of thing. So I guess my social anxiety really stems from early childhood bullying. Like from the age of 5 to 10, I was bullied repeatedly, all the time, every day, almost all day long at school. And so, and like I told you before with my, like I told you before, like my parents' parenting style at the time, they've changed obviously as they've gotten older, but their parenting style at the time was very disciplinary and no really talking about things or reasoning with you or whatever. It was kind of just like, you did this wrong, okay, goodbye. And so that was that. And so that didn't help either. So those two things combined, I think, really contributed. But in college, let's fast forward to college, I realized that, stuff is not normal. This behavior that I'm having, this anxiety that I feel, it's not normal. It's impacting me socially now because I'm at the age where I want to make connections with people of the opposite sex. I want to, date. I want to do this and that. And I just have so much anxiety talking to guys. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I'm like that. And I have anxiety talking to everybody, but it was specifically guys, especially because I didn't want to be judged by them for some reason. And so I went to a therapist because our school offered free counseling for like 6 sessions. I think I went to 1 or 2. She diagnosed me with social anxiety disorder. She explained, I told her about my childhood and things like that. She explained, that I'm bringing fears in from childhood into the present. I'm assuming things about people based on my early experiences. What are you doing? I'm assuming that people are not going to like me. I'm assuming people are going to judge me. I'm assuming that people are going to be horrible. When realistically, the person in front of me is somebody that I do not know, and they should be viewed with a clean slate. Once she told me that, what the diagnosis is, and the reasoning behind my behaviors, and the fear that I had, the anxiety that I had, I kind of just ran with that. I went ahead and I found a book. I think I still have that book downloaded on my computer, but it's a self-help book about social anxiety disorder. I think I can probably find it and link it in the description box below if you want to look at that. But it really helped me a lot to understand what was going on in my brain, why I was like this, and how to overcome it. So basically, now that I'm a clinician, I know that some of the techniques in there were CBT, cognitive behavioral type things. I won't say therapy because it wasn't therapy, it was a self-help book. But also there was some exposure stuff in there where you have to basically just put yourself in those anxiety-provoking situations and keep yourself in them in order to overcome the anxiety eventually. And then also just thinking back to like your situation, like, okay, let's say one thing that I was really afraid of in college was eating in the cafeteria. I hated eating in the commons. I always went to the Burgoo. We had a different place called the Burgoo, and you can pick up your like little sack food, and then you can go to your dorm and eat if you wanted to, or you can go somewhere else and eat. That's what I did for a while. I really hated going to the common area because that's where people sat down, you ate, you sit with your friends, and I didn't have friends yet. And so, or I had acquaintances. So one of the things I challenged myself to do was to sit in the commons. Didn't matter where I sat, who I sat with, or if I just sat alone, I needed to do it. The more I did it, the less anxious I got about doing it. Eventually I could go to the commons, I could eat by myself, and it was no big deal. But at first, just being in the line to get in gave me so much anxiety. I would be shaking, shallow breaths, everything. So my tip for you is, if you're struggling with this, expose yourself to those situations, because the more you expose yourself, the more your brain will learn this is not a threatening situation and I'm safe here. And as you start to do that, the anxiety will dissipate and you'll be able to do those normal activities. When you have like a social situation, like an interaction with somebody, don't look back at the interaction and think, oh man, I should have said this differently, I should have done that differently, or I should have, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you can learn some things from your interaction, but don't obsess over it. One of the things that we do with social anxiety is we obsess over past situations. We think about how we said this, or what we said, or what we could have said differently, or maybe what we were wearing, or how we were standing, or whatever. I mean, I was even sometimes thinking about how to breathe differently. And so you don't want to do that. You want to focus on, what the interaction was like, what did you get out of it, how did it make you feel coming out of it, and what did you notice? What did you learn, and what can you apply next time? And then you move forward. You forget about it just like that. Okay, that's another tip that's in that book that I really honed on to, because I found myself a lot of the time obsessing over those past experiences, and that just made me more anxious to have more experiences like that. The other thing that I did that was really helpful was focus on, when I was having conversations with people, focus on what they're saying rather than what I'm doing, how I'm standing, how I'm breathing, what I'm wearing, how my hair looks, what my face looks like. What should I say? And that was another huge thing that I would get so anxious about. What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? I don't know anything about this topic. What should I say? What should I say? Like, how you have like small talk with somebody and they start talking about something that you have nothing, you don't know what to say. And then because you're obsessing about the fact that this topic is not, something that you're experienced with or that you know about, you're just like, oh, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to say. And then it makes it worse. And then you're just sitting there in awkward silence with this person who's like, all right, well, nice talking to you, bye. So the way to avoid situations like that is really just focus on what they say. Take one or two things that they say that either you have a question about or pique your interest for some reason, and comment on it. Comment on it or ask a question about it. It's one of the things that I tell my clients with social anxiety disorder to do, because they'll say automatically, I don't know about this topic, and it's coming into the conversation with a defeated attitude instead of just like looking at it as an opportunity to get to know the person sitting across from you or to ask questions about their life. Sometimes if you don't have any experience with something that they're bringing up, then talking about it, like asking questions about it, trying to figure out what it's about, or just being honest, I don't know what this is, what's this? Can you tell me about it? Type of thing. They're not going to think you're an idiot for not knowing. If they do, then they're probably a jerk and you probably don't want to talk to them anyway. But most people would love for you to ask those types of questions because they like to talk about themselves. So for me, whenever I feel anxious, I just ask people questions about themselves and it gets the conversation going. Eventually they'll say something that I have experience with or I want to comment on or I think is interesting, and then that also keeps the dialogue engaged. So those are my quick tips for social anxiety disorder and basically my experience with it. Obviously I'm not perfect, but I definitely have come a very long way. for example, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, has like these measures that you can take to measure different disorders, but basically for this, measuring like anxiety in social situations. And I took one with the mindset that I had when I was like really super socially anxious versus like how I was years later. And my anxiety decreased substantially. It was severe, and it went from severe to like mild or moderate or something like that. So yeah, it decreased substantially, and that was just years ago, so probably has decreased even more now. Eventually I may not even have this problem because I just keep working on it. You know, I keep putting myself in those situations where I keep practice. And I tell my clients all the time, you know, you at some point in your life have learned, your brain has learned that social interactions are dangerous, whether that be because you were bullied or because you were abused or whatever the case may be. There was a situation, or there were several situations that reinforced that social situations are not safe for you. And so obviously it's going to take time for your brain to learn opposite of that. It's going to take a lot of exposure, it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of patience for you to realize, for your brain to realize social spaces are safe. Sometimes people are not nice, but you will survive anyway. So thank you for watching my video. I hope that helps you if you struggle with social anxiety. If you know somebody who does, maybe this will help them. If you don't, but you know people who do, or you come across people who are shy, maybe this gives you some insight as to how their brain is working and what's going on with them. And it can kind of give you some cues as to like how to approach that instead of like judging them for being weird, maybe just understanding they've got other things going on that have nothing to do with you and that you don't know about. So anyways, I hope that helps you. Also understand that this is not mental health, like this is not a mental health session. I'm not your therapist. You should definitely consult with your therapist. You should consult with your counselor, whoever you're seeing for your mental health care, about doing different techniques and things like that. But for me, as a client, you know, and not as a therapist, this is what has helped me. And this is what I pass on to my clients when they come to me with social anxiety disorder. All right, thanks.